The global economy is teetering on the edge, and for some nations, 2025 could be the breaking point. Political unrest, crushing debt, collapsing currencies, these aren't just alarming headlines. They're the early tremors of potential national collapse. Many of these countries are already in severe distress, while others are just a single shock away from tipping into chaos. In today's countdown, we're revealing the 10 countries most at risk of collapsing in 2025. And believe me, number 2 will truly stun you. These are nations caught in the crosshairs of economic disaster and political instability, where even small setbacks could ignite a full-scale crisis. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Number 10. Laos. Laos, a small Southeast Asian nation, has been drowning in debt, much of it owed to China through the Belt and Road Initiative. According to the Vientiane Times, the country's public debt now exceeds 88% of its GDP, leaving its economy dangerously exposed. Infrastructure megaprojects, like the China-Laos Railway, have boosted connectivity but drained the treasury. Foreign currency reserves are running critically low, forcing the government to impose strict import controls. The Laotian kip has lost nearly 50% of its value in just 2 years, making imported goods painfully expensive. Inflation is surging, pushing basic necessities like food and fuel beyond the reach of many households. Tourism, once a key economic lifeline, has struggled to recover from the pandemic. With fewer visitors and lower foreign investment, the country is heavily dependent on China for both trade and financial support. This reliance leaves Laos with little room to maneuver economically or politically. If Laos cannot diversify its economy and restructure its debt, a full-blown fiscal crisis could be imminent. The danger isn't just an economic collapse, it's the potential for political instability as public frustration boils over. In 2025, the country's future will depend on whether it can break free from its spiraling debt trap. Is Laos on the brink, or can it quietly recover before it's too late? What do you think? Number 9. Sudan. Sudan is teetering on the edge of complete collapse in 2025, with a brutal civil war tearing the country apart. The ongoing conflict between rival military factions has left the economy in ruins, infrastructure destroyed, and millions displaced. According to the UN, over 7 million people have been forced from their homes, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world. The war has decimated Sudan's agricultural production, plunging millions into food insecurity. Once a key exporter of livestock and crops, Sudan is now dependent on international aid just to feed its people. Inflation has soared to triple digits, and the Sudanese pound has lost most of its value, making basic goods unaffordable for the average citizen. With foreign investment evaporating, Sudan has little economic lifeline to cling to. Many international companies have fled the country, leaving behind empty factories and abandoned projects. The lack of stability means that even if a ceasefire were reached tomorrow, it could take decades to rebuild. The political situation remains just as dire as the economic one. Peace talks have repeatedly failed, and regional powers are struggling to mediate a solution. Without drastic change, Sudan risks becoming a failed state in every sense of the word. With years of conflict, is Sudan finally reaching the breaking point? Share your thoughts below. Number 8. Lebanon. Lebanon's slow-motion collapse has entered a dangerous new phase in 2025. The country is still grappling with the aftermath of its devastating liquidity crisis, which wiped out savings and gutted the banking system. According to World Population Review, Lebanon remains one of the most dangerous and unstable nations in Asia, with violent crime and political unrest fueling public anger. The Lebanese pound has lost more than 98% of its value since 2019, sending prices for food, fuel, and medicine skyrocketing. Ordinary citizens are unable to withdraw their own money from banks, and unemployment remains staggeringly high. The World Bank has labeled Lebanon's economic crisis as one of the worst globally since the mid-19th century. Infrastructure has crumbled under the weight of neglect and corruption. Rolling blackouts leave neighborhoods without electricity for most of the day, and the healthcare system is stretched to the breaking point. Teachers, doctors, and civil servants are leaving the country in search of work abroad. The political deadlock is only making things worse. With no functioning government able to implement reforms, Lebanon's spiral into chaos shows no sign of slowing. For many Lebanese, the dream of stability has been replaced by the desperate hope of simply surviving another year. Lebanon's crisis has dragged on for years. Can the country ever bounce back? Number 7. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is still reeling from the economic crisis that erupted in 2019, and the scars are far from healed. Inflation remains high, with food prices up more than 25% compared to last year, straining households already struggling to make ends meet. The nation's foreign reserves, though improved from their lowest point, remain dangerously thin, leaving the economy exposed to global shocks. Political instability continues to shake investor confidence. Frequent protests and strikes disrupt daily life, as citizens demand stronger action against corruption and mismanagement. The government is walking a tightrope between implementing austerity measures to meet IMF loan conditions and avoiding further public backlash. Sri Lanka's reliance on imports, from fuel to medicine, keeps its balance of payments under pressure. With the rupee still weak, these imports are becoming increasingly expensive, worsening the cost of living crisis. The tourism sector, once a lifeline, has not fully recovered post-pandemic, limiting a vital source of foreign currency. Unless Sri Lanka can stabilize its currency, boost exports, and restore political stability, the country risks another wave of financial turmoil. For millions of Sri Lankans, the threat of renewed hardship looms large, with little sign of relief on the horizon. After last year's meltdown, is Sri Lanka really recovering, or just hiding its problems? Number 6. Iran. Iran's economy is in a prolonged crisis, with U.S. sanctions and domestic mismanagement crippling growth for over a decade. In 2025, inflation is hovering near 50%, and unemployment remains persistently high, especially among the youth. Ordinary Iranians are feeling the squeeze as wages fail to keep pace with skyrocketing prices for essentials like food and fuel. The rial continues to lose value, eroding purchasing power and pushing more people below the poverty line. According to recent data, over 60% of Iranians are now classified as living in economic hardship. The government's efforts to stabilize the currency, including tighter controls on imports, have so far done little to stem the decline. Ongoing political tensions, both domestically and internationally, further undermine prospects for recovery. Iran's limited access to foreign investment and global markets keeps growth prospects bleak, while the oil sector, its primary revenue source, faces production and export challenges due to sanctions. Without significant policy changes and a breakthrough in international relations, Iran's economic collapse could accelerate. For ordinary citizens, this means a continued erosion of living standards and an increasingly uncertain future. Is Iran's economy collapsing under pressure, or can it still find a way out? What's your take? Before we dive into number 5, quick heads up. If you're hooked on stories like this, you'll love what I share on YouTube Peaks. From behind-the-scenes research to early topic drops, it's where the real deep dives happen. Links below. Come join the Inside Circle. Number 5. Argentina. Argentina has faced economic crises before, but in 2025 it's teetering on the edge of a collapse that could be the worst in its modern history. Inflation is already running above 200% year-on-year, eating away at the value of salaries almost as fast as they're earned. The peso has plummeted on currency markets, and ordinary Argentines are lining up at banks in fear of losing their savings. The government's fiscal deficit has widened dramatically as it struggles to service foreign debt. Talks with the IMF are ongoing, but investors are losing confidence, fearing another default could be imminent. This loss of faith is triggering capital flight, draining much-needed reserves from Argentina's central bank. Agricultural exports, long the country's economic lifeline, have been hit hard by drought and falling global commodity prices. With reduced revenues, Argentina's ability to stabilize its currency and curb inflation is further undermined. Families are cutting back to the bare essentials as the cost of living spirals out of control. If Argentina cannot secure a strong rescue package or reverse its economic freefall, social unrest could intensify. Street protests are already growing in Buenos Aires and other cities, echoing the mass demonstrations of past crises. For many, it feels like history is tragically repeating itself. Argentina has survived countless crises. Will 2025 be the one it can't escape? Number 4. Bolivia. Bolivia's economy, once buoyed by natural gas exports and high commodity prices, is now facing a dangerous downturn. A prolonged slump in gas revenues has left the government with fewer resources to fund public programs. Combined with political instability, the situation is pushing investor confidence to dangerous lows. In 2025, Bolivia is grappling with a widening fiscal deficit and an economy overly reliant on resource exports. Inflation is climbing into double digits, making everyday goods harder for working families to afford. The local currency is under pressure, forcing the central bank to burn through reserves to defend it. Political polarization is worsening the crisis. Investors are closely watching upcoming elections, with fears that populist economic measures could further spook markets. According to Reuters, uncertainty has already triggered a slowdown in foreign investment and stalled infrastructure projects. If Bolivia fails to diversify its economy and stabilize its finances quickly, the risk of a full-blown recession grows daily. For a country where millions depend on subsidized goods and services, any economic collapse would have devastating humanitarian consequences. Bolivia rarely makes global headlines, so why is it now on the collapse watch list? Number 3. Turkey. Turkey is grappling with one of the most severe economic crises in its modern history, and the pressure is intensifying. Inflation remains stubbornly high, well into double digits, continuing to erode the value of the lira and hitting families with crushing living costs. According to Reuters, the government's plan to phase out its expensive FX-protected deposit scheme has rattled markets, removing a key pillar that had temporarily stabilized the currency. This policy shift has amplified investor anxiety, sparking fears of accelerated devaluation and further capital flight. The central bank's efforts to restore confidence are constrained by dwindling foreign reserves, leaving little buffer to absorb external shocks. Combined with political volatility, structural economic weaknesses, and surging global energy prices, Turkey finds itself navigating a dangerous economic minefield. For ordinary citizens, this isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's the daily struggle to afford groceries, keep up with rent, and keep small businesses alive. Savings are disappearing faster than they can be replenished, and wage growth can't keep pace with spiraling costs. The strain is so intense that some economists now warn of a potential full-scale financial collapse without immediate, sweeping reforms. Given Turkey's strategic position bridging Europe and Asia, the consequences of its collapse wouldn't stop at its borders. Energy supply routes, migration patterns, and regional trade could all be thrown into chaos, creating ripple effects that would shake both continents. Number 2. Thailand. Thailand, once hailed as a resilient economic powerhouse of Southeast Asia, is now facing troubling signs of decline. Tourism, accounting for roughly 20% of its GDP, still hasn't fully recovered from the pandemic, while manufacturing exports are faltering amid slowing global demand. Reuters recently reported that the Bank of Thailand is preparing to cut interest rates to boost growth, a move that underscores the severity of the slowdown. However, such rate cuts carry significant risks. A weaker baht could make imports more expensive, driving up inflation and squeezing household budgets already stretched by rising food and fuel prices. Political instability has only compounded the problem, with investors increasingly wary of committing capital at a time when Thailand needs foreign investment to drive recovery. Small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in the tourism, hospitality, and retail sectors, are teetering on the brink. Many never fully recovered from COVID-era losses, and new economic shocks threaten to wipe them out entirely. Widespread closures would hit employment hard, worsening the downturn and reducing consumer spending. If Thailand's economy continues to slide, the impact will be felt far beyond its borders. As a critical hub in regional supply chains and trade networks, its collapse would disrupt commerce across Southeast Asia, undermining growth in neighboring economies and sending shockwaves through the global market. Number 1. Venezuela. Venezuela remains the textbook example of economic collapse in the modern era, and in 2025 the crisis is deepening at an alarming pace. Hyperinflation continues to destroy personal savings, with the bolivar losing over 90% of its value in just the past year alone, leaving ordinary citizens unable to afford even basic goods. Food, fuel, and medicine shortages are now daily struggles for millions, forcing families to depend heavily on remittances from relatives abroad just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. The oil sector, once the engine of Venezuela's prosperity, is now producing at only a fraction of its former capacity. Years of corruption, political interference, poor maintenance, and the crushing weight of U.S. sanctions have left vital infrastructure in ruins. Attempts to diversify exports or deepen partnerships with non-Western allies have moved slowly and have been unable to fill the economic void, trapping the country in a cycle of dependency and decline. Public services are collapsing at every level. Extended power outages can plunge entire regions into darkness for days. Clean water access is sporadic and unsafe, and healthcare facilities are understaffed and lacking critical supplies. This humanitarian catastrophe is driving one of the largest migration crises in Latin American history, with over 7 million Venezuelans having fled since the downturn began, creating new strains for neighboring countries. Without sweeping reforms, credible leadership, and robust international assistance, Venezuela risks cementing its status as a permanently failed state. The tragedy is not only measured in economic loss, but also in the erosion of hope, as an entire generation grows up knowing little beyond instability, scarcity, and political chaos. For those who remain, survival has become a daily battle with no clear end in sight. From Laos to Venezuela, the stories in this countdown serve as sobering reminders of how quickly nations can unravel under the weight of economic mismanagement, entrenched corruption, political instability, and volatile global markets. Each country's path to collapse may differ, yet the underlying themes remain constant: weak governance, dwindling resources, and rising public anger. The lesson for the world is undeniable. In an interconnected global economy, no nation is insulated from the domino effects of financial collapse. Instability in one corner of the globe can ripple across continents, impacting trade, migration patterns, and even the balance of geopolitical power. If this breakdown opened your eyes to the fragility of nations in 2025, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your engagement helps us keep uncovering the critical stories that shape our world, and together, we can ensure these realities are brought to light before it's too late.